everyone, and welcome to the OnlyLandFans Show. My name is Kendall Lejeune, and our guest today is Meir Shemtov. Born and raised in Uruguay, Meir Shemtov currently lives with his family and kids in South Florida. In addition to successfully running his 14-person, seven-figure land business, Meir is also the founder of LandEmails.com, a done-for-you service that gets hot seller leads for land investors using cold email marketing. Meir, thanks so much for joining us. How are you today?
I'm doing great. So grateful to be here. How are you
Well,
guys?
thank you so much for joining us. I'm so excited to talk to you today about our topic. The topic is six-figure profits from cold emailing landowners. I know a lot of people are excited about that. Lots of buzz around this topic right now. Before we jump into that, though, would love to chat a little bit about your background. Tell us, how did you get started in doing land deals?
Land deals. We love land.
Yes, we do.
Land, I was I was living in New York back in 2020, and I had a co-living business, and I had that for a couple of years. And then I sold that right before COVID, actually, to my partner. And my brother had a friend who was buying and selling land. And my brother got into it. And my brother and I had an e-commerce company at the time, right after I left my co-living business. And he was like so busy with his land business. And we were starting out this e-commerce company. And he was like, dude, I'm just like I'm not passionate about this e-commerce stuff anymore. It's so tedious and time consuming and boring. And like I'm doing all these deals and I just don't want to continue doing these e-commerce. And he's like, would you be upset if I like stop working with you on this Amazon stuff? I'm like, I won't be upset. Just show me what you're doing. And he was just showing me what he was doing. And I was like, great, this is just going to be our next thing. And I actually wanted to do a luxury glamping resort. So I asked him, why don't you help me find off-market landowners that we could reach out to? And he showed me how data tree works and he showed me how all his stuff worked. And then I was about to send a mailer to Joshua Tree just so I could find some land and develop a resort. And he's, Mayor, don't do that resort thing. Just mail Joshua Tree, buy land, sell land, do what I do. And I was like, you know what? Let's go for it. And that was my first mailer in 2021 or two, something like that. And that was the beginning of a very fun journey that I'm in.
Wow, I love that. Background in e-commerce, quite a common path. I've talked to quite a few land investors who had like a background in e-commerce, so there's got to be some kind of parallel there. What type of skill did you bring over from the e-commerce space into the land business? If you had to say this translates pretty well, what would you say that would be?
Without the shadow of a doubt, is demand and supply. Like understanding a product that is in high demand and there's low supply. And that's the same in every industry, but in land, we're using software, we're using technology to identify what is, a market that has high demand, low supply, where we can bring this product to market and right away get it sold. It's the same thing online.
That's fantastic. Do you remember your very first deal, your very first land deal?
Yeah, so it depends what you call the first deal, the first property I bought or the first property I sold.
Oh, that's a good one. Let's go with bought first, and then we can go with
Or
sold.
the first contract or the first seller. Yeah. So there was a lot of firsts because I was living in LA at the time and my first mailer was in Joshua Tree. So some of the sellers would call and I would look up where they live and they live in LA and I would be like, let me just go to their house and just talk to them. And also I'm from Uruguay, so Spanish is my first language. So I remember this guy called me up in Spanish, just talking to me. And I quickly look up where he lives, and I'm like, he's like a 40-minute drive. Let me just go to his house. And I printed out a purchase agreement and I go to his house and he said, I don't want to sign this. And I want to sign the deed. I just don't want to sign this purchase agreement. Just bring me a deed and pay for it and let's go. And I'm like, yeah, sure, absolutely. It sounds great. Let me just call my brother real quick. He's my partner. And I call him up and I'm like, hey, what's the difference in the deed and the purchase agreement? I don't understand. He signs a paper and then the property is mine. So why do I need all those papers? Why don't I just so no, it was very funny. Like how little I knew about what I was doing, what I was just doing. And as far as he was concerned, I'm an investor. Like I'm a land investor. That was my first seller that I was talking to. And then in terms of my first deal, it was a 90-degree angle slope. And I called an agent before. I didn't know that we had to check topography at the time. And the property across the street sold for 70,000. And this property I was buying it for 9. So this was like amazing. I called an agent. The agent was like, yeah, we can sell that for 70. And I didn't realize that the agent didn't actually go to the property. They just looked at it on the map and then we bought it. This is before I built out this double close machine that I have now. It was just buying and selling. So I bought it for 9. And then when she went to take pictures to list it, she was like, "Oh, whoops."
Oh no. Oh
So
no.
so that was the first deal that I purchased, and obviously it taught me a lot of lessons, but I was so motivated to get that thing sold that I called everybody and that ever bought any land in the area, and I stumbled across this guy who I see kept on buying stuff in the area, land. I'm like, this guy's an investor of sorts. Let me call him up. I called him up and I said, hey, dude, I got this. Do you want it? He's like, no, man, I don't want this. But if you have anything like 40 acres or plus in this area, let me know. I'll buy it. So I was naive and I was like, let me do a campaign 40 acres plus in this area. He's for sure going to buy it because he told me he's going to buy it, right? So I did a campaign, crickets. I didn't get anybody, nothing. One guy texts me and I have these 40 acres and I want X amount. So I call the buyer. I'm like, I have these 40 acres. How much you want it for? He wanted to pay less than what I was paying for it. So I had to basically, and they were both also in LA. So I had coffee with the seller, I had dinner with the buyer, and I squeezed the buyer, I squeezed the seller, and there was a 30,000 spread. And we closed on it. And then I ended up selling that shitty lot for 14. So I made some money on that one because I hired somebody online to create a 3D rendering of a house overlooking the whole mountain, which made it look very cool. And that was our front picture in Zillow. And then we started getting a bunch of calls. And so we sold that as well. A lot of lessons learned, but sometimes my biggest lesson is that every challenge that I have is an opportunity for growth. It's an opportunity to learn, to push myself, to do new things, to meet new people, to figure out creative ways to dispo something, to maybe put a house on it, maybe sell it to the neighbor, maybe build out. So that was my welcome to the land business.
Calling all ambitious land flippers, ready to transform your business with proven systems and processes? Imagine this. One of my students recently closed 2 land deals and got another under contract in just 24 hours. That's the power of a well-oiled land flipping machine. My exclusive coaching program is specifically designed for action takers just like you. We'll build out your entire operation from lead gen to dispo, implementing these systems on real deals from day one. But hurry, I'm only accepting 3 new students until 2025. If you've done deals, have a growth mindset, and are ready to scale, visit kindlecall.com now. Let's turn your land business into a consistent profit powerhouse. I love that. I love the action. I see so many people that are like, oh, I need to set up an LLC and I need to get this and I need to do this and make sure I have a perfect logo and make sure I have a perfect website and
Right.
do all of this stuff before I even send out my first campaign. I love the messy action stuff because you learn lots of lessons that way. So you mentioned that your very first business model was more of the traditional you buy and then turn around and flip. So is that your current business model? You mentioned something about double closing. What are you doing
Right.
now?
So right after that mailer to Joshua Tree, I sent a mailer to Chattanooga, Tennessee. And I sent like a small mailer and I got 14 contracts, 14 sellers who wanted to sell. These are like smaller infill lots, whatever. And I said yes to all of them and I signed all of them and I flew to Chattanooga. I'm like, I got to see what's going on here.
Okay.
And they started meeting with the neighbors, meeting with the sellers, just meeting with a title company, meeting with a broker. And I realized that I didn't have money to buy all of these. And but there was some margin, some profits to be made. And that's when I started learning more. It's not my strategy, but developing my own flavor and how to really double close something, how to explain it to the seller, how to explain to the buyer, how to explain to the agent. It wasn't very common then. And I was able to sell a lot of these parcels without actually buying them. And shortly after that, I started getting into the more the six-figure deals, and I double closed something for $500,000, and it was just growing from there. And that's when I realized I could do bigger deals, much bigger deals with much bigger profit margins if I don't necessarily buy everything and then sell. Granted, there's a lot of issues with that. If you want, we can get into it, but double closing has a lot of challenges and risks and like everything. But if because I was cash strapped, and also I learned from my mistakes with this 90-degree slope, I was like, okay, I gotta maybe take it a little slower here. So that's really how I got into double closing. And today we buy some stuff, we fund other people's deals as well. Subdivisions we have to pay for, not always, but a lot of the time. And then yeah, the bread and butter is still double closing. It's still getting properties under contract, finding an end buyer, working with the seller, working with the buyer, paying everybody, paying title, paying the closing costs, and then whatever is left, that's the spread.
Fantastic. So you mentioned there are definitely cons, right? There are pros and cons to everything. So can you talk to us a little bit about what are some of the biggest takeaways and the biggest aha moments that you had when you started developing or employing this double close strategy? For those of us who maybe are listening and have never double closed, just used to doing this traditional flip, can you talk to us a little bit about that?
Sure. By the way, I'm in a guest house that we just built out of containers, and it's really cool, but I don't know about the Wi-Fi strength here. Do you hear me well, or is it
Yeah,
choppy?
you're great. You're great.
Okay, okay, good. Because I hear a little bit of a delay, just making sure that we're good.
You're good.
So I guess yeah, the way double closing works is, let's say a seller wants to sell his property for $240,000. Now the property is worth, let's say, 300. Okay. It's not a good business practice to buy it for 240 plus closing costs, plus title, plus everything else, and then sell it for 300. And then the agent's going to charge you, let's say, 5%, right? So that's 15. And then you're left with nothing really after you do all the things. And if you're borrowing money or you're taking an equity partner, like it's just there's nothing left there. So what most land investors do is they tell the seller, listen, I need to get this for 100. I need to get it for 120. And a lot of sellers will be like, no. So what we do is we say, listen, it's worth 300. You want 240 for it. We'll give you 240. You give us 3 to 4 months, 3 months. And we explain there's a due diligence process and there's a lot of different things that we have to go through before we close on it. And during that time, we have permission from the seller to market it to in the MLS or to market it to the public. And we market it for, let's say, 290. And then we market it ourselves. Because if we bring in an agent, a realtor, there's just not a lot of, meaning the margins are, the profit is good, but the margin relative to the purchase price isn't great. So like they'll eat up all your margins. So we do that sort of strategy, and where we can still make 20 to 30,000 per deal by double closing it. Or if a property is very risky, or if a property has just different kind of issues, you're like, I don't really want to risk my money, but let's get on the contract and let's see what we can do with it. And that way we can do a lot more volume than if we were just buying everything. Also, eventually you run out of cash, if you buy every deal, and then you're gonna have to take investors' money, and investors take half of that, right? And investors want to see a certain return. So it's a good strategy to be able to scale. And I was able to scale a team fairly quickly in terms of lead gen, acquisitions, and dispositions. And then we can handle a lot of volume, and then we can turn around these contracts. So that was the aha moment of double closing.
Yeah, I love that. I'm a huge fan of double closing. I do that in my own business as well. Obviously, different types of double closes. Are you specifically doing pass-through closing? Can you talk a little bit about how you do that?
Which closing?
Like the pass-through closing where you're
Oh,
using
pass-through
P to
funding.
P? Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So there are three ways of, maybe four ways of doing this, right? One way is double closing, where you need to bring money to the table, but both closings are happening on the same day. So you still need to get that The first contract cover that for the first. So if you're buying for 70, selling for 90, you bring 70 for that day, you wire it to title, and then the next day they'll wire 90 back. And a lot of people lend transactional funding, which is money for, and they'll charge 2%, whatever, 3% for that day. The best part, the best type of double closing is pass-through funding, where the title says, hey, we'll take the money from the buyer, we'll pay the seller, and we'll give you the rest. So you don't have to bring anything. And that's very much title dependent, or county or state. Everyone's got their own rules around how they do that. Then the third way of doing it is you do an assignment. So the assignment of contract is you take your contract with the seller and then you assign it to the buyer, and the buyer pays you a fee for that. The pro of that is that you don't have to have two closings. So you save on closing costs and you save on the hassle. If you don't have a transaction coordinator and you're doing all of this yourself, it's just so easy to just send the contract. You don't have to notarize anything. You don't have to do anything. The risk with that is that it shows up on the settlement statement, and both the buyer and the seller are going to see how much money you're making. So it only works in two cases. It works if you're making very little money. So let's say you're buying it for 6,000 and then you're selling it for 8,000. So you just assign it for $2,000. No one's going to care that you're making $2,000. Or if it's a very expensive property, let's say it's $1,200,000, right? And you're assigning it for $1,250,000. So you're making $50,000. But because relative to the 1.2 million, and you're dealing with people that understand that you're a wholesaler, understand that you have your cost of getting these properties under contract and your marketing expenses. So it'll work. So ironically, it works for like really expensive property or really cheap properties, or in a property where the profit you're making is not that great. So that's when you could do it. That's when I do it usually. But if it's a buy for 80, sell for 100, like nobody wants to see that you're making 20. So even though you're not really making 20, you have to pay a lot to get the property on the contract, to market it. You're paying the brokers. So like people think you're making all this money. It's not true. It's you're making money, and that's the business. But the seller is going to feel like they're getting ripped off, and the buyer feels that they're paying too much, and none of them realize that someone's paying all closing costs and someone's also creating this opportunity for everybody. So when no one knows what everyone's making, everyone's happy, right? The seller got his property sold, the buyer got himself a beautiful property, the agent got paid, title got paid, everyone's happy. So that's why you want to keep everybody in their lane by doing two separate closings.
Yeah, that's great. Because in those two separate closings, they have two separate HUD statements, two separate closing statements. You only see, the seller only sees what you paid them, the buyer only sees what they paid you. So no one knows what's happening except for you.
Yeah,
To an extent.
exactly right.
Awesome. So you mentioned earlier about double closing a $500,000 property. My ears perked up a little bit whenever you said that. Can you talk a little bit more about that? Give us a little walk through that case study.
Sure. I'm closing one now at the end of the month, 1.3 million property. Double closing that as well. And it's just the same thing, just a couple more zeros, man. It's I
Well,
mean,
tell us about the property. Is it large
sure.
acreage,
I mean,
or what's your
I can
spread?
think of many. One of them in Texas, this guy wanted 360 for his property. This is when, before I built out the team, this was a while ago. I just remember it because we were texting, and the guy texted back 360, just those three numbers, 360, 360. That's how much he wants for property. No, hey, how are you? Nothing, 360. In my mind, I'm like, this guy's a waste of time. He's not motivated, whatever. I called an agent and he's like, maybe you can get 400, maybe 410. I was like, okay, maybe after 8, maybe I'll make 1020 after everything. Then I called another guy, and this guy was much younger and more like in tune. This was like an hour, 40 minutes away, about 40 minutes away from Austin. And this guy is, you can sell us for $510,000. And I said, you sure? He said, I'm sure. I'm like, who, why, when? He's, you're right out of Austin. There's a lot of money in Austin. There's a lot of young tech people. This is a beautiful view. I drove there. I saw it. You can get 510 for it. He listed it for 510 and we got 510 for it. And when the time came to close, I didn't wire anything. The 510 came in from the buyer, and he even got a loan on it, which a lot of people are like, how do you double close with a lender? It didn't matter. 510 came in, the seller got his 360, the agent got his like 20 something thousand that he made on it, and everybody else got paid, and then they wired us the rest. And you better believe that agent answers my phone calls every time I call him, right?
Yeah, yeah, I'm sure. I would answer.
So
I would answer when I saw your number come up. Speaking of agents, can you talk a little bit about how you work with agents, specifically like when you're doing these double closes? I know through my own experience, there are some agents that won't touch a double close listing if you don't have a power of attorney signed, if you don't own the property. So can you talk a little bit about how you go about finding agents? Particularly in that example, you said that agent actually listed that property for you. So can you talk a little bit about that?
yeah, just from the few stories that I shared, there's that first property that the agent didn't even bother going to see it and almost screwed up my entire land career. And then you have another agent who casually made us an extra $100,000, right? So clearly there's very different types of agents. So your question is actually a very good question. And to answer the question of do we even use agents? So not always do we use agents, right? So if there isn't a lot of profit to be made and the property is very straightforward, it's a square with road frontage, everybody can go see it. We don't need anyone showing it. It's easy. We know what it's worth. Just sell it. Now, if the property is complicated or the entrance to the property is complicated, somebody needs to be there to show the property to be able to sell it. And that's when we use agents, when it's either a difficult entrance or it's a difficult sell, or we don't really know what the price is. So then we need to call somebody to go see it and tell us the opinion. And if we do that to them, we're not going to leave them hanging. So we're going to use them. And so that's like the rule of thumb when we use and when we don't. Sometimes if we try to list something ourselves and it's not moving for a little bit, we'll give it to an agent because typically if it's a good one, they'll do it. Now, how do we find good agents? It really depends on the type of property. So if it's like a large, like right now we're looking at 100 acres, you go to like Lands of America, lands.com, and kind of you see who's got a lot of listings that are similar to yours in a very similar like area. So that person that's selling 100-acre tracts Monday and Thursday, like the guy knows what it's worth, he knows how to sell it, he's got a buyer's list, he knows what he's doing. So that's like where I would go if it's like a large recreational rural uh property. If it's like a smaller property, just go on Zillow, Redfin. You can even go to Xome, Xome, which is another MLS website. And you could download all the listings that are in that view. And then you just put it into ChatGPT and you say who's got the most listings. And then you could do it also, I think, with Redfin, because yeah, when you search for a property on Redfin, you have the map, and then on the right you have all the properties, and then in the bottom of every property it says who's listing it, right? So you literally do Command A, the whole screen, Command C or Control C if you have a window, and then you paste it in ChatGPT, Command V, who's got the most listings, or make me a list of make me a spreadsheet of all the agents that I'm pasting in here and top to bottom who's got, and then it'll give you a spreadsheet. And then you'll see, I don't know, this guy or this gal has 16 listings, right? So then you go back to Redfin and then you do Control F and then you search the name and then you see all the listings that they have. And then you start going through them. And not just in the for sale, but also in the sold, obviously. You want to see who's selling. And then you very quickly start realizing, okay, who's the main player over here? Who knows their stuff? And then you call them and you try to get them to go see it, try to give you an opinion of value. And that's a little trick how you get the most active land agent in the area.
Imagine having a complete toolkit for success right at your fingertips. That's exactly what you get with OnlyLandFans School, our premium online community. For a low monthly fee, access our treasure trove of resources, the on-market deals course, acquisitions tool suite, and Dispo Secrets library. Plus, connect with fellow flippers in our active community. Whether you're hunting for deals or closing sales, Only Land Fan School has you covered with step-by-step guidance and insider knowledge. Ready to supercharge your land flipping journey? Join Only Land Fan School at olfschool.com today. That's fantastic. Thank you so much for sharing that. Now, whenever you are talking to these agents, let's say it's the very first time you've ever talked with a particular agent, you're explaining the situation, you don't own it, you have a contract. How do you handle like objections or pushback whenever they say, hold on, you have to own the property before I list it, or my broker won't let me list it unless you own it? How do you handle those types of objections?
Move on to the next one.
Ex-agent. It's good.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, there's so many. You don't want my business? That's fine. I don't.
Fantastic. I love it. I love it. Very good. So, we've talked a little about how you started with that $9,000 lot. You've told us how you're now doing million dollar deals. What type of mindset shift did you have to make in order to make that leap? So there are people that are listening and say, "Oh, I just want to do small deals because the big ones are risky, or I'm afraid of doing a big deal for whatever reason." Can you talk to us a little bit about what that mindset shift was
Right.
like for you going into those bigger deals?
So I believe I'm Jewish. I'm religious. I believe in God and the creator of the universe, and I believe that everything that I have comes from above. The world was here before me, will be here after me. The world doesn't revolve around me, okay? And there's whatever money is gonna come my way will come, whether I do. It's just we believe that it's all predestined on like the first day of the year, like how much everyone's gonna make that year. And that's why before the year starts, we make a commitment how much charity I want to give. And then based on that, 10x that is what you're going to make, right? So that's a little bit how, in terms of mindset, like how I operate. I get married, I have kids, I have bills, and things need to get paid. So things get paid. You know what I'm saying? So that's how I see money in general. We give about these days about 25, 28% of profits away to the causes that we care about. And for me, that's why I'm doing this. There's a certain amount of money that I need, and thank God I have what I need. I don't have the jet, but
Not
besides
yet.
besides for the jet, thank God I'm so grateful. I have what I need. So then what's motivating me to like work harder? What's motivating me to the hustle? And that's because there's a lot of things I care about. There's a lot of change I want to see in the world. With that mindset, I know that if I just need to do the work, meaning I just need to like to go through the motions. So adding a couple zeros to a deal is the same buyer, it's the same seller, right? It's the same title company, it's the same agent. If you're double closing, it's even the same level of risk. Now, in the bigger deals, there's sometimes like earnest money deposit that people want to see. So that's when you're starting to play with real money, where if it's like $1 million deal, you might need to put down 20 grand, right? But people are putting down 20 grand to buy these shitty squares that they're trying to flip for 30, right? So why risk 20 to make 10 grand when you can risk 20 and make 100 grand, right? There's land out there. And then, okay, so we spoke about belief. We spoke about just going through the motions and adding a couple zeros and doing bigger deals. And then there's a third, I think, mindset that I think that I've been blessed with that most people can learn from and maybe just take into account. And that is that basically you need to act like you know what you're doing, and just you need to just pretend, fake it till you make it kind of thing. Like, who do you think sells these big deals to entitlement companies? Regular people. That's who sells it. Who do you think goes under contract? Regular people. And if in my mind I'm this small little dirt flipper in a corner of Nevada deserts, then that's who I'm gonna be, right? But D.R. Horton, they need to build houses. There's a housing shortage in America. Who are they going to buy the land from, right? Why don't they buy it from me? They could buy it from you. I'm not more special than anyone else, but I'm also not less. You get what I'm saying? It's not, it's like they're going to buy it from somebody. Might as well buy it from me. So I think when we
Yeah.
realize that this land is going to exchange hands and I just want to be part of it because I have things to fund and I have ideas and visions and plans and goals and dreams and the purpose, then I just get involved and then I get it done. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I love that. That is so good. That is so good. So, we've talked a little bit about your business model. Let's dive into the lead gen component of your business. Topic of today, we're going to be talking about six-figure profits from cold emailing landowners. So, let's dive into this cold emailing lead gen strategy. Can you give us a 30,000 foot view for people who have never heard of this strategy before? Can you talk to us a little bit how this works?
Sure, absolutely. So, who are sellers? People who own land and we want to buy from them, right? Who are they? they're regular people, right? They wake up, they check their phone, they go to work, right? So these people, they're getting mail left and center. They're getting texts from every land investor, especially if they have land in some county. They're getting bombarded from all sides. But none of them are getting an email to their either work email or personal email, well-written email, professionally written, saying, "Hey, Kendall, I noticed you have 10 acres in whatever, Georgia, or whatever, North Carolina, or whatever, Nevada. And I was wondering if you want to sell it. We're paying roughly about $3,000 to $4,000 an acre. Would you ever sell it?" So something like that, right? That's very different than getting all these like blind offer mailers that go to the garbage. Okay. That's very different. So when I started skip tracing data to send text messages, I noticed that some of the columns had email addresses. And I'm like, why don't we use email? Why don't we send them emails? And I noticed that it was very difficult to do it and to land in the inbox and not in some like spam or promotions tab. And that's when I realized that's probably why no one does it. Because texting doesn't really have any, not yet, probably in a couple of years, Apple's going to roll it out. But if you text someone, it's a text. It doesn't matter if it's spam, and it doesn't matter if it's if it's your mother, it's going to show up in your text. But email is different. So I started doing my own shtick with email, trying to see if I can figure out how to get into people's inboxes. And I did. And it was a lot of work. And I almost compromised my entire domain because, like an idiot, I was using my actual domain, my actual email. And next thing I'm emailing documents the title and it's going to their spam folder because I just spammed 1,000 people. There's a lot of mistakes that I learned that I've gone through that I had to overcome. And it was pretty complicated. And it still is, right? So think about it. When you check your email, when you go to your promotions or spam tab, there's like multi-billion-dollar companies that are still landing in those tabs, right? So who am I to say that I have better marketing than them? But because I'm smaller and because I'm more nimble and I'm able to do all these little tricks, I'm able to actually land in people's in a very, clean way. Now, whenever we talk about lead gen, consult your attorney, okay? Talk about cold calling, talk about voicemails, talk all these things. I'm not saying I'm not an attorney. I'm just saying that what we do is we try to stay very much compliant and still land in people's inbox and asking them if they want to sell their property. And very early on, actually, one of my first deals, I started doing this right away. When I realized I'm paying for skip trace data and I have all these emails, I'm like, let me put them to use. I got this woman who, this was my first email deal. She got the property from her grandparents and it had to go through probate. And she never really got any of the marketing material because it was still in her grandmother's name. But she got the email. And the reason she got the email was because she was paying the taxes. So I was able to, she showed up in the emails. And she got my email and she said, yeah, I'll sell it. And I ended up buying it for maybe like 4,500 or something. And I sold it for 47,000. So that was like 1,000x return. And this was from an email, right? And that actually, I have the HUD statement and I think I put it on Twitter or something. So you can actually see, like you can see it, like it's there. So that's when I realized that mailers are good. I guess they work. They're expensive as hell and everyone's mailing. Email is like sending mail 2005 before all the land investors got involved. That's number one. Number two, there's something about list penetration where you're showing an omnipresence and you're really targeting these people from every angle. So like they get a letter from you, they get a text from you, they get a cold call from you, and now they got an email at work. They're like, okay, this company's big and they really want my property. So let me do a deal with them. So there's like this omnipresence. And then there's also like really touching people from all the different pipelines and methods that you can reach someone. I think personally that's very effective. And after that, I started scaling it and started growing that. And I started getting more. I actually made myself a t-shirt that I'm wearing now. It's land emails that you mentioned so a lot of people are asking me how to do email marketing for land. And I figured why not let people use my team and my systems. But in the back of the shirt, if you can see it, I basically
It's the email.
I printed an email that we sent somebody. And his response was, sure, call me. We bought it for 80 and we sold it for 185,000, something like that. And it was an email. And it's so interesting. Like I literally go to the email and it's there. I see it. It was an email. The guy got my email. He answered. He sold it. We bought it. We sold it. We made 100 grand on it. And there's a few more. There's another one that um, we were in touch with them via text like 2 years ago, and then they got our email and they're like, "What's time to sell?" But we're not going to text people. It's a matter of like just doing things repeatedly, and then you get deals that way.
I love that. So, some specific questions. I'm going to drill down just a minute here on this cold email strategies. It sounds like you're essentially sending a blind offer or some type of like offer range in your email. Is
Yeah,
that right?
yeah, we're doing that.
Okay. And what does the sequence look like? Are you sending only one email to the person or is it multiple emails? How does
We
that
we
sequence?
send we send an initial email, then we send follow-ups, about 4 follow-ups, because every domain you can send about 500 a day. You have to make multiple domains with multiple email addresses under every domain, if you want to send thousands every day. You certainly have a limit eventually of how many emails you can send a day, right? You don't want to just burn those bullets on follow-ups after 4 or 5 times when you can be reaching out to new people. It's like a balance of how much you actually want to email people. But yeah, 4 is fine. You can do more if you want. You could do
And
20.
how do you space them out? Is it once a month or every
Yeah,
other month or
every like 2 or 3 days.
every 2 or 3 days? Nice. Okay.
Yeah.
And so you mentioned about burning the domain. For people listening that may not be familiar with that, can you talk a little bit about how that works and how you actually approach it?
Sure. Where do I start? So when you go to your email, right? So you see there's some emails that end up in promotions, some end up in spam, right? What happens? Why are they going to these places? So there's a lot of, let's say, parameters that all the email servers put in place to identify what this email is and what is this domain, and is this a real person or is this like a person trying to sell something, and then divert those emails accordingly. So if someone marks you as spam multiple times, then that's not good. If you're sending 1,000, 2,000 emails from one email address, not good, right? There's a million things that you could be doing wrong. And then you end up in these places in the email purgatory. So what you want is you want to sound like a person. You want to not include links. You want to not send so many. You want to send content that's engaging and people will answer you. You want people not to mark you as spam, because if they do, then your domain, your company email address, and all the emails associated with that domain might become flagged as spam very quickly. And in that case, they're going to just go to they're not going to, so anybody can send email. The whole idea of email is deliverability. Okay. Anybody can open up a MailChimp account and send a million emails. It's how are you going to actually land in people's inbox and have those open rates, response rates, get people to become leads, get people to sign those contracts. So you really want to be monitoring constantly those emails and those domains to make sure that you're landing an inbox. And if you're not, then you have to take a break from it. You have to warm them up. Warm them up means you have to send emails back and forth and create the account to a place where it's backup and not marked as spam, and be able to reuse it for marketing.
I see. So how do you monitor those domains? Is there like a service or a site that you can go to monitor?
Yeah, so there's a lot of different like you have to monitor many different, I would say, parameters or many different potential red flags. So there's the DKIM, there's the SPF, that there's all these different like models that have been invented to track the validity, the legitimacy of your email, right? So it's not just checking one website if your domain is good or not. It's the first telltale sign is if your open rates and your response rates are going low. If you're not getting open rates, response rates, something's wrong with it. So then you got to check it with all these different, so to speak, agencies and see what's up. And then try to start cleaning them up again and not use them so much, go to a different domain for now, and then until it's healthy enough to continue sending mail.
Got it. And when you say that there are multiple domains that you have to use to cycle through, how do you approach that? So if someone is listening to this and they're like, listen, I'm used to texting or I'm used to sending mail. I want to start this to test it on my own. What are the steps that they would have to go through? You mentioned don't use your personal email address. So can you
Right.
talk to us a little bit about just
Yeah.
very basic
Yeah,
steps?
for sure. So if your company name is, let's say, land.com. Okay. Let's say that's your name. All right. And you don't want to be sending emails out of that domain because that's your website, that's your personal, that's your actual email that you use to communicate with title and everyone else. So what you should do is you should get a similar sounding domain like fastcashlandusa.com or fastlandcash today, or just add a word so when they actually go to the website, it directs them to your actual domain without that extra word, and that's okay. They don't realize, and it's the same thing. But if anything happens to this USA domain or this try or get or hello or any random word that you added, it's just a domain. And if you can ever get it back to working again, okay, you close the domain, it costs you $14. You know what I mean? So you want to open multiple of these. And then also, because I mentioned every domain, you can only send about 1,000 a day or 500 a day per domain. So if you open a lot of domains and they all sound similar, then you can send a lot of emails. So if you want to do this yourself.
Hey there, Land fans. If you're enjoying this episode and would like to see more episodes like this, please be sure to let us know by liking and subscribing below.
Number one, I would recommend you educate yourself a lot in how to do cold email at scale. There's a lot of email marketing companies out there or agencies, but they don't specifically do cold email outreach. They'll do like email outreach, which means people signed up and people. So that's a very different animal than showing up hello unannounced to someone's inbox. Learn about that, open up different domains, start testing it out, see how it goes, see what your open rates are, what your response rates are. And if they're healthy, keep rocking. And if not, and if you're getting tired of doing things yourself, just you can come to us or you can go to any cold email marketing that agency that will do it for you. Again, if you're a solopreneur and you're just starting out, I wouldn't even recommend you do email marketing. I would say do whatever the mainstream stuff. Email is mainly someone who's got like a ton of data because they've skip traced so many people and they're sitting on so much, right? And they've already texted them and mailed them, and they want like another layer, like on top of everything else, to really hammer in the message and to try to get these deals that I'm getting. Then go for it. But if you're just doing it yourself, you could do email marketing, but it's so much work and so tedious compared to just opening up a texting platform, launch control, whatever. It's easier. So it's definitely not the easiest thing to do. And again, that's why we created this service, because people didn't want to deal with all this stuff. They just wanted it done for you. But if you're starting out, you can give it a shot for sure. But it's a pain.
Yeah, lots of nuance for
Yeah.
sure. I'm sure. You mentioned open rate and response rate. What would you say are some benchmarks that you would consider good open rates, good response rates?
I can pull mine up here. Let me pull them up from the past 6 months. Let's see what we did. So we sent 36,000 emails in the past 4 months, and we've gotten 2,000 replies. That's above 5%, which in email, that's pretty good. Our open rate has been about 40% open rate. A good open rate means that you are actually landing in people's inbox. Because if you're not landing in people's inbox, then there's no way they could open your emails. So
Right.
that's a strong indicator that you're actually not in their spam or promotion tab.
Got it. So we want to shoot for 40% open rate.
40% is if you know what you're doing. If you don't, maybe you get less. But if you get really low, if you get like 5% or starts to dwindle out, then you have a problem.
Gotcha. And whenever you're sending these emails, are you attaching contracts to it? What's the CTA? Is it give us a call if you want to sell, or how does that work?
Yeah. Yeah. A lot of people ask me that. Are you sending a contract? Are you sending pictures? Are you sending my philosophy is don't send anything like that. We're very straightforward. We don't even include links, nothing. And I'll give you a little trick. We don't even put an unsubscribe button, but what we do is we write, if you'd like to opt out, just reply unsubscribe or reply opt out. And then when they reply, then it actually tricks the system to think that we're having conversations with these people. And it actually improves our servers and it improves our domain deliverability. So every person who replies unsubscribe, thank you. But which is legal. We're giving them an option to subscribe. So it automatically, we unsubscribe them, obviously, right? So that's just in an effort to not include, like, we're trying to sound and look and feel like we're just a random person, like a friend, like a human, not a company, right? So we don't include attachments. We don't do any like weird stuff like that. Just a regular, straightforward, hey man, do you want to sell your property? Yes or no? And we include a price.
Yeah, that's really good. So, what are you finding is typically the lead or the email number to contract ratio that you're getting? So, for every X amount of emails, you're getting one contract. Do you have that data?
Yeah, yeah, I have that. And it's not going to be super high, and I'll explain to you why. We got from the 36,000 emails in the past 4 months, we got 2,000 replies, like I mentioned. So that's about 5% replies. And from all the people that replied, 54 people said, yes, I want to sell, and yes to the price that we gave them. Okay. Because we qualify a lead, not just somebody who wants to sell, but somebody who wants to sell at the price that we want to give them and we want to pay them. So that's about 0.015%. Okay. So, this was 4 months. So that's about, let's say, roughly 15 leads a month from sending the volume that we're sending. But these 15 leads are people who, again, they agreed to our purchase price. So they just need to get on the phone. So like I said, if you're starting out and this is your only lead source, maybe start with cold calling, maybe start with texting, maybe start with something else. But for someone who's got this on the done for you kind of thing, like A to Z on the back burner, someone's taking care of it, getting an extra 10 motivated leads a month, why not? You're going to get leads out of it.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, that's really good insight. Do you know exactly like whenever you are sending out your offers, do you change the offer amount, like the percentage of market value? How do you determine what you are offering? Is it 40% of market value, 70%?
Yeah, I don't care about percentage. I care about profit. Okay, so am I making 20 to 30,000 at the minimum on this deal? If the answer is yes, now I don't care if I'm buying for 200 and selling for 250, or if I'm buying for 30 and selling for 60, right? If I'm gonna make 30, I'm gonna make 30. So we just, how much are we selling it for? Let's subtract 20 to 30 grand.
Got it. And so that's how you're calculating
Yep.
um, exactly what your that initial offer is going to be.
Yeah, the more expensive property is, we subtract more because there's more percentage closings and costs and all that. But yeah,
Sure.
generally speaking, that's it.
Fantastic. Very good. You mentioned your business. This obviously there's lots of different moving parts and pieces to the cold email game. Can you talk a little bit about what you like, how you actually work with investors? Do they need to bring the data to you? Do you pull the data? How does all of that work?
Yeah, so it's a done for you A to Z service. What you do as a land investor is you give us all your skip trace data, and then we give you leads. It's simple. So that's basically how it works. Yeah, you can change the copy if you want better, different, but we use the copy that we know that works. Um, you can choose the domains that you want, but we'll suggest domain names. Like there's not a lot of work on your end. We handle all of the front end, meaning the campaign management, but also the back end, which is ensuring deliverability. And right now we have like a monthly rate, but we're actually doing a 2.0 launch very soon, where it's going to be more and this is the first time I'm actually announcing it, which is more pay per lead model.
Okay.
So that will make it a lot easier for land investors, where it's like there's not really, there'll still be maybe a monthly fee, like but smaller, and then it'll be like you don't get any leads, you don't pay. It's more like pay per lead, and we'll be delivering leads to you that way.
Fantastic. And so, do you have any skip tracing services that you love whenever you are doing this in your own business so you can get email addresses?
I use direct skip. I've tried Versium, didn't really like it, but I've heard good things about it from other people. Then I tried another one. There was a third one that we tried, and it wasn't that much cheaper than direct skip. Direct skip, you can get it. Also, Land Insights has it. You can basically get it for 5 cents a record, and it comes with phone numbers, it comes with emails. So that's the best that I've seen, and I've seen that it works well.
Excellent. Very good. Let me ask, I'd love to jump over to Dispo really quickly. Whenever you mentioned that sometimes you use realtors to list the property, sometimes you list the property, are you using like flat fee agents? Is there any other way that you are marketing the property? Facebook Marketplace? How are you finding your buyers?
Yeah, MLS is most of my buyers come from the MLS. We use a lot of flat fee listing services. Everyone's always asking me which ones I use. Honestly, every county and every state is different. They have like their own. Some of them are a pain in the ass to work with, it but the process when a buyer calls is a very good process. Like they'll call it, it'll get routed to you right away. Others are like very friendly and very user friendly and very cheap. But when a buyer calls that number in Zillow, it takes them to some crazy phone tree that you never hear back from them again. You got to test these. It's a trial and error all the time. We sell on Facebook Marketplace. It's a lot of brain damage for the kind of quality leads you get. Some people swear by it. We don't have that much activity. We have a lot of activity, but I don't know that I can say that I sold a lot of things on Facebook Marketplace. Land.com, we have a subscription with them. It's very expensive. Not sure it's worth it. I've sold some stuff there, but not sure it's worth it. Yeah, we call neighbors. We do a lot of this kind of stuff. But honestly, if you're in the market, that's like a good market and you're priced, the MLS is your best shot. We also put a sign, do all those kind of stuff.
Got it. And would you say that the majority of your buyers are retail end buyers, or are you also working with builders, developers? How does that work?
Yeah, it depends on the asset type, right? So if it's like a rural infill, like a 5 acre tract, 10 acre tract. So that's the bass boat property, right?
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
like so then you're dealing with somebody who just wants land, hunting, or to just want to go out there on the weekends. If we're talking about larger tracts where it's like in a subdividable area, then obviously you're looking at developers, builders, entitlers. So developers and builders aren't the same thing. Okay. So developers are people who do a lot of the horizontal development or the paperwork, and then they create those paper lots to sell to builders, right? So like the DR Hortons and these builders, they don't necessarily want to develop things. They just want to show up with their trucks and build houses and getting it out, right? So there's a lot of those kind of in between developers, which we are starting to become